Good afternoon. At this time, I would like to ask our IT professionals to start the audio recording of the regular meeting and to admit any members of the public who have chosen to listen to the meeting online. If you could verify that for us. Thank you. My name is Dwayne Vaughn, and I am General Counsel and Assistant Secretary of the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia, also known as Atlanta Housing. Before the regular meeting is called to order, please consider the following announcements. We welcome the members of the public who have joined us in person in the Pecan Room of the Atlanta Housing Headquarters for this regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners of Atlanta Housing. We also welcome members of the public who have joined the meeting via audio conference. There is also an option to view the meeting live streamed. Members of the public can find the link in the Notices section on the Atlanta Housing website. The live streaming link is also contained on Atlanta Housing Board docs. Please be advised that any members of the public who wish to address the board during the time for the public comment period must have signed up on the public speaker sign-up sheet at the front door of the Pecan Room prior to the time the meeting is called to order, or have sent a comment by the time set in the notice for the meeting. A link to the meeting agenda, board resolutions, and presentation materials are available for review by the public by accessing the link on the Atlanta Housing website at www.atlantahousing.org/notices. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, good afternoon. Wow, this is loud. All right. My name is Larry Stewart, and I serve as the chair of the Board of Commissioners. I'm calling this regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia, to order. Today is Wednesday, July 26th, and the time is 2:07 p.m. Will General Counsel take roll to determine quorum for the meeting?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Commissioner Kirsch.
Here.
Commissioner Alvarado.
Present.
Commissioner Elliott. Commissioner Faruqi. Commissioner Faruqi. Commissioner Harris. Commissioner Harris. Commissioner Hooker.
Here.
Mr. Chair, there is a quorum present.
All right, thank you. The agenda has been presented to the board for review and comment. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? All right. Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All right, so moved by Commissioner Alvarado and seconded by Commissioner Hooker. Is there any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of this motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried.
The minutes of the regular Board of Commissioners meeting held on June 28, 2023 are before the board for review and comment. Are there any proposed corrections to the minutes of this meeting?
All right, hearing no proposed corrections, we have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on June 28, 2023. I have a motion, I think I heard. May I have a second?
Second.
All right, so moved by Commissioner Elliott and seconded by Commissioner Kirsch. Is there any discussion? No. All right, hearing no discussion related to that motion, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed, any abstention? The motion is carried. All right, we are now into the public comment component of our board meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board signed up on a public speaker sign-up sheet as they entered the meeting. Each speaker who has signed up will be called to the podium and will have 3 minutes to address the board. After those members of the public who are here to speak finish, we will read any questions received in advance. Have any members of the public signed up to speak?
Mr. Chair, no members of the public have signed up to speak, nor did we receive any comments prior to the meeting.
All righty. So sounds like we will close our public comment, and we will acknowledge that Commissioner Faruqi has joined the meeting. Welcome. This ends the public comment portion of the meeting.
Presentation of the resolutions. Before you, Commissioners, is a copy of Resolution Number 2334, where the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia, seeks authorization to take all actions necessary to consummate the closing of Herndon Square Phase 2.
All right. And we're going to be doing these because typically we would do a consent agenda, and since we didn't have our committee meetings, we're going to go through each of these. But for those of you who see some new faces, typically we would run through this a little bit in a more streamlined fashion, but today we'll go through each resolution one by one. May I have a motion to consider resolution number 34, excuse me.
So moved.
All right, may I have a second?
Second.
All right. So moved by Commissioner Elliott and seconded by Commissioner Kirsch. Mike Wilson, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. So this authorization is requesting Board of Commissioners authorization to take all actions necessary to consummate the closing of Herndon Square Phase 2. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a little background on Herndon. It's revitalization of the former Herndon home site at 510 Cameron Madison Alexander Boulevard, Northwest Atlanta. It's going to be another multi-phase mixed-use, mixed-income development with 718 units total projected. Back in 2016, the board selected Herndon Homes Developer LLC to be the developer, and that's a partnership of Hunt Development and Oakwood Development. The first phase, you may recall, was completed back in 2021. That's a 97-unit senior building. You may recall last month we talked about, you gave approval to support a tax credit application for 4% credits in September. That's going to be 180 units. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Herndon 2. It's a second rental phase on a 3-acre site. It's going to be 201 units, including a mix of units at 30% home flex with tax credit, 60% AMI with home flex and tax credits, 60% AMI with tax credits only, 80% AMI with tax credits only, 30 market rate units, and 1 employee unit. So this is illustrating something new that we're doing, what we call income averaging, where the units will range from 30% to 80%, the tax credit units, I should say, as long as they average out to 60% AMI. And this provides a mix of incomes in addition to the market rate component that we're talking about. And the reason why we like to see that is tax credit investors in today's world really don't want to see more than 20% market rate units. We used to like to see 40, but that's difficult to sell in today's world. Next slide, please. Here's a site plan. In fact, you can see, I'll start in the lower left-hand corner. That's Herndon 2, which we're talking about. Right behind it, you can see Herndon 3. There's an existing senior building, which is shown to the north of that. There's proposed townhouses in the back part of that site. And then the upper left-hand corner is proposed to be a grocery store. Next slide, please. Here's a kind of a bird's eye aerial of what that's going to look like. Again, Northside Drive at the very bottom. To the right, Georgia, the World Congress Center calls that their marshalling yards. At the very top of the site, you can see the North Yard Business Park. That's where the gathering spot is. You see the senior units in the upper left-hand corner. You can see the proposed grocery store in the lower left-hand corner. To the right is Herndon 2, and Herndon 3 is right up above that. Next slide, please. So here's the unit mix, a little more detail. Again, it's a mix of units at different AMI levels. 80 home flex units with tax credits. You see a mix of 44 tax credit units, 60% AMI, and 46, 80% AMI. 30 market rate units and a 1 employee unit that I spoke of a little earlier. 201 units total. Next slide, please. So in terms of support for the project, first we're making a mortgage loan, a second mortgage loan of $16.5 million with a construction period of 48 months at 0% interest. At completion of construction, it will convert to a permanent loan, approximate term of 40 years for a total of 44 years at 1.32% interest with payments of P&I based on 50% of net cash flow. And the proceeds of the second priority loan will be used to fund vertical construction costs. We're providing HomeFlex units to the 80 units, HomeFlex assistance to 80 units that I mentioned earlier, receiving tax credit assistance. Initial term of 15 years with an option for a 5-year extension that will continue to extend beyond that point upon continuing program compliance for the term of the ground lease. The ground lease itself will be at a nominal rate of $10 per year for a term of up to 75 years. At the end of that ground lease, the land and all improvements revert back to AH. And affordability of 80 age-assisted units will be required for the term of the ground lease. Next slide, please. Here's sources and uses. You can see they're looking at a private first mortgage of 14.6. Our loan of 16.5 is a second mortgage. They're looking at about $46.5 million of tax credit equity, both federal and state. They're getting a good faith deposit, which is related to their first mortgage back, which would be a source. And they're looking to defer a little under $200,000 of developer fee for a total of about $78 million. You can see the uses on the side. Again, $78 million. Next slide, please. I guess one key point in this one is we talked about for phase 3, the proposed phase 3, we're going to have a 49.9% interest in the general partner. And that's a pretty substantial interest. And so because Atlanta Housing is a nonprofit, that would mean they would have to use a less aggressive depreciation schedule. So what they've asked is that we use our for-profit affiliate rather than our normal AFI. Again, as I said, it allowed them to use an accelerated depreciation schedule, which increases the value of the tax credits to the investors and allows for higher tax credit pricing. Next slide, please. So in terms of additional benefits, we're going to receive 35% of the developer fee, 50% shared net cash flow, 1% origination fee paid at closing, a $2,500 per month construction inspection fee, and a 1% co-management fee based on net rental income. Next slide, please. Opportunity inclusion, developer going to look to achieve 55% of total eligible hard and soft costs as its participation goal for MBE, WB, SBE businesses. They're going to meet or exceed the Section 3 safe harbor requirements, which really, it should say 25% of the total number of labor hours for the Section 3 workers, and 5% of the total number of hours for targeted Section 3 workers, which are people who receive our assistance. There's an existing hiring plan, which they'll update as needed as they go on a phase-by-phase basis. Next slide, please. They've met with and secured the support from both the English Avenue neighborhood and NPUL. I think this is the last slide coming up now. And so we're recommending to take all actions necessary to complete the financial closing, and I'm ready to pause and take any questions or comments that you have. Yes, sir.
I'm curious as to the feedback you received from the NPU. Just summarize in less than a paragraph, just sort of what some of their concerns, what were some of the opportunities they thought can derive from this development, and how do they want to continue engagement to ensure that community needs are met moving forward?
So I would say that the neighborhood and NPU are very supportive of the project. Probably the biggest concern that they've had to date, they've had a desire to have a grocery store in the neighborhood, sort of a food desert. And I think they're excited to find out that we have plans to provide a grocery store. So with that in mind, they're very supportive of the development, the housing development we're talking about doing. But we're going to, I guess, address the last part of your question. We're going to continue to have our dialogue with them to make sure they maintain their support of our project.
Just for our educational benefit, because we're looking at a lot of deals coming before us, which is great. Thanks for all your work. On the HomeFlex units specifically, with the 30% AMI and 60% AMI units, what level of rents will we be paying for those? We've seen some where, given market conditions, we've done above that level. What does that look like?
So because they're tax credit units, we target the rent levels that we pay at 60% AMI. The 30% and 60% we talk about, that's more about eligibility of the residents. So it's people at that income level, but we're still paying a 60% AMI rent.
So Atlanta Housing is paying the 60% AMI rents for
Yes.
all of those units?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Question about the opportunity inclusion. It says the developer is committed to making its best efforts to achieving 55% of total eligible and hard soft costs to basically go towards minority businesses. Can you speak a little bit to how the contract and the oversight incentivizes, encourages, oversees that and makes them accountable?
So I will respond to that by saying we have a group that's specifically tasked with making sure, or working with the developer, make sure they achieve the types of goals that they're talking about. In fact, I see they're here. Albert, who you know is our SVP of AMS, and then Rolando, who really heads the team that looks to ensure compliance. I see Albert's coming this way, so I'm going to step aside.
Good afternoon. So I want to introduce Rolanda Stanberry. Some of you already know her, but she is primarily responsible for the MBE, WBE, and Section 3 initiatives, which are substantial. When I started at Atlanta Housing several years ago, it was one person doing it part-time. Now she's leading a group of how many? Three persons. And she spends more time at the assist agencies than she does sometimes here at the office, which is desirable. With Herndon specifically, 55% is a very high target, and so some would say it's unrealistic. But that is what the developer at the time said that they would do. So when they said they would do that, we said, okay, that's above and beyond the 35% that we normally request, but you're committing to that, right? They said yes, so then we incorporated that into their contract. So now we have been hounding them for the infrastructure phase, for phase 1 and phase 2. They've told us at several points, that's really hard, we can't really do that. And on the infrastructure phase, they proved that they couldn't do that. They did about 13%. But then for phase, when they came back, and they got feedback not just from us, but from the community, and they came back with their hat in hand and said, you know what, we really need to do better, can you help us? Rolanda took them by the hand, took them to the assist agencies, and for the first phase, they were able to get close to 55% minority participation. But they had to go to every assist agency twice. They had to make sure that they advertised all of the upcoming bidding opportunities from the general contractor. And they run a series of workshops to prepare small businesses to be able to bid not just with a back-in-the-envelope number, but also rolling up from the plans and specifications. There was an event yesterday that was sponsored by Capstone Construction that's a general contractor for Hunt, and I'll let Rolanda kind of tell you a little bit about what the event was yesterday.
So actually, the event was today. We just got back. And it was called the Bid Prep Day. So what Capstone did was invited 4 of their estimators to meet one-on-one with anyone who was interested in bidding on multiple trades. And so it was very impressive to me. I've been doing this kind of work for almost 30 years. And they really moved the needle just to see so many minority contractors take advantage, because typically they don't show, because they feel that they don't have a chance. But they were there, really enthusiastic, getting that one-on-one guidance with the bids, specs, the estimators. I think we should adopt that practice and look to our other general contractors to do something like that.
That's great to hear. That's exactly kind of why I was asking, one, because the goal seemed pretty high, and is it actually, are they on track to do that? And 2, there's so many deals that will come through that developing or learning or figuring out what the best practice is to help contractors, meet their commitments is obviously going to be very helpful. So
Right,
thank you.
and they held 2 information and outreach sessions where, again, they talked about the bid, they talked about the project, any questions. I mean, this is a very good group to work with. I've never seen general contractors so engaging, I must say, and then to have their support and to work one-on-one with the contractors is a good thing, because there's so much work out there, and they could choose not to do work with us.
Yeah, and just to kind of set expectations, we were able to hold this developer to their commitment, but it took extraordinary effort. We're going to continue to do that kind of extraordinary effort for other business partners, but we anticipate that they will come in with more reasonable percentages, and we will nevertheless try to have that be the floor and not the ceiling. We're going to try to get them to kind of outperform what their expectations are as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Real quickly, can you remind us the status of the grocer? Has that been committed, or that's still to be lined up?
So we have I guess the right term is LOI with them. Most of our discussion now is really about the price for acquiring the land, and we're getting they have an appraisal, we have an appraisal, and we're getting a third one to kind of maybe clarify what the real value might be. But once we reach that, we should have an agreement with them.
That's terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to assume this grocer will have a full pharmacy in there as well?
Full pharmacy, I'm not sure about that.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
All right. Sounds like hopefully a grocer, and everybody's doing 55%. That's what I think I heard. That's levity. All right. Cool. Any other questions or concerns or comments? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Great, thank you.
Commissioners, before you is a copy of Resolution Number 23-35, where the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia seeks authorization to take all actions necessary to consummate the closing of Inglewood Phase 1B.
May I have a motion? May I have a motion to consider Resolution 2335? All right, so moved by Commissioner Alvarado and seconded by Commissioner Faruqi. Trish O'Connell, it's up to you. Oh. Oh, Michael's back? All right, so they didn't put the right name in here.
Yeah, I should
So
have stayed up
that's
here.
somebody else, not me.
All
All
right.
right, Mike Wilson.
Okay, so again, the authorization is to take all actions necessary to consummate the closing of Inglewood Phase 1B. Next slide, please. A little bit about Inglewood. It's 30.4 acre site, former Inglewood Manor property, multi-phase, mixed-use, mixed-income development. This one used to have 324 public housing units. Back in 2018, the Age Board selected the Benoit Group and the Michaels Organization be development partners. Since that time, we've been working, and specific to this one, with the Benoit Group to complete due diligence, programming feasibility, et cetera, developing a master plan. They submitted 2 applications back in the round in October for an Inglewood multifamily phase and an Inglewood senior phase. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Inglewood Senior, which is Phase 1B. It's a 2.29 acre site. It'll consist of 160 units. 21 which will receive Home Flex, again, targeted people at 80% AMI, and 139 which will be targeted people at 60% AMI. But in all cases, we'll still be paying 60% AMI rents. So originally, when they talked about doing this phase, they were going to do 80% affordable tax credit units and 32 market rate units. So they're changing now to be a completely 100% tax credit units. The reason they're doing that, it allows them to secure some additional tax credit equity to help resolve a funding gap they have. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. So since they're doing 160 tax credit units, we were going to do 128 home flex units, but now we're proposing to do home flex for all 160 tax credit units. Next slide, please. Here's a rendering what they think it's going to look like. I like the Tesla in front. Next slide, please. Here's a unit mix in a little more detail. 160 units total. You can see they're all home flex and tax credit assisted, but at different AMI levels. Next slide, please. So we're making a construction and permanent loan of up to $3.3 million, construction period of 24 months, 2 years, and a permanent period of 40 years for a total of 42 years. It's 1% simple interest for each period. They'll get, that's both the construction and permanent. We'll get a 50% share of net cash flow to repay the debt, and we'll receive a 1% loan origination fee. Next slide, please. Additional support, we talked about the home flex system we're going to give to all 160 units, 15 years with an option for an additional 5 years. And of course, that can be extended as long as they continue to comply with the program for the term of the lease. The ground lease will be up to 75 years. And in this case, they're actually making a ground lease payment, which is a little unusual. They're going to pay us $375,000 at closing. At the end of the ground lease, the land and all the improvements will still revert back to Atlanta Housing. Next slide, please. Here's sources and uses. Private first mortgage, about $17.5 million. Our loan is $3.3 million. They're getting Beltline TAD funds of $3 million. Federal tax credit equity of $29 million. State tax credit equity of 16.7, about just under $17 million. They're deferring about $240,000 of their fee for a total cost of $70 million. You can see the uses on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. So additional benefits, once again, we're receiving a 30% share of the net developer fee as a co-developer. We'll receive a 50% share of net cash flow, 1% origination fee, a $2,000 per month construction inspection fee, and a co-management fee of 1% of the effective gross income. Next slide, please. So last month, Commissioner Faruqi asked me, what happens when construction costs go up and this rapidly? And it's a good question. She's actually asked me that a few times. So I thought this is a good case study. So in this case, they had a gap of $12 million. And that's really within the last 90 days they've told us that. So one thing they did to address it, I mentioned they've gone from 80% tax credit units to 100% tax credit units, which means they get additional tax credit equity. They need to get an additional bond allocation from Invest Atlanta and DCA to pass a 50% test. I don't want to explain what that means at the moment, but so they're also securing $3 million from the Beltline TAD. They're asking us to increase our loan from $1.8 million to the $3.3 million. And I mentioned they're deferring a portion of their developer fee. So the combination of all those things eliminates that $12 million gap. Next slide, please. But I want to make one more point about that. So what they've been able to do is cobble together several different things to help address that. It's not all, hey, can you increase your loan by $12 million?
I appreciate that, and thank you for addressing the question. And part of the reason why I was asking is because we know that inflation is a challenge. I mean, it's not just AH and development projects. I mean, every entity out there, private and public, is dealing with it. And as chair of Finance Committee, I feel like we need to be paying attention. One thing I do want to note is when there are gaps, they have remedies, and it's great that they have been creative about putting those remedies in place. But at the end of the day, we have to be thoughtful about the fact that they're still public funds, right? So whether they're coming from AH or Invest Atlanta or, sorry, what?
Bundling funds?
Public.
Well, and it's not all
So-
public because they got some additional private tax credit equity.
Understand, but some of the funds are public, right? So I think one thing that'll be helpful, just making this request here, is to, in the next Finance Committee, to get a view of where all the different projects are and if any of them have gaps and what those remedies are. Because my guess is that several projects underway are facing cost pressure
Yes.
to keep to their timeline. So if we can do that at some point in the next quarter, that'll be great.
We can certainly do that. And if you recall, when you asked the question, I said that's a fight we fight every day, and we're dealing with that with multiple projects.
Totally understand. I get it.
Very good. All right. So opportunity inclusion, we talked a little bit about that a little earlier. So no, unfortunately, they're not doing 55% in this case. It's going to be more like 35% of MBE, WBE, SBE. They're doing 25% of labor hours for the Section 3 workers and 5% of the targeted Section 3. And again, we're going to work with them, Albert and Rolanda and their team, to develop a hiring plan that they'll implement. Next slide, please. So that's my recommendation. We're requesting authorization to take all actions necessary to complete the financial closing of Inglewood Senior Phase 1B. And I'll pause and see if there are any additional questions.
So I'll just make two questions. So the first one is relative to what was said there. So I concur that we should probably think about this more holistically, just to make sure that there aren't any precedents that we're setting that we can't long-term, sustain as it relates to the funding gaps. The second thing is, I think what I heard when you both came up talking about the 55% and that it is a challenge. I see a second deal where now we're talking about 55%. I was actually
No,
making,
that should be 35 in this case.
that was just a cut
Yeah,
and paste.
55 sort of an
Copy.
exception. 35 is kind of our,
So not committed to 55 on this particular one?
yes. That's
Okay,
right.
all right, so I missed that part. All right,
Okay.
good. I was about to say, maybe we need to talk about that in one of our committee meetings as to how we're going to sustain and staff that, if that's going to become more common. So, which I certainly am not against, but I certainly don't want to make sure that, I want to make sure that we can staff it appropriately. So, okay. My two questions are now taken care of. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions?
All right, if there are no other questions, then I will call for the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? The motion is carried.
All right, thank you.
Commissioners, before you is a copy of Resolution Number 23-36, where the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia seeks authorization to extend the term of the HomeFlex Agreement with Grady Redevelopment Partnership 1 LP for Veranda at Auburn Point 1.
All right, may I have a motion to consider Resolution 23-36?
So moved.
May I have a second? Second. All right, so moved by Commissioner Hooker and seconded by Commissioner Faruqi. Shannon, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I stand before you today seeking board approval to extend the HomeFlex agreement for a term not to exceed 20 years for this particular development. The current HomeFlex agreement and board authorization is set to expire on September 30th, 2023. The current owner is Grady Redevelopment Partnership 1 LP. The property manager is Integral Property Management LLC. This is a senior community 62 and older. It is located at 115 Hillard Street, Atlanta, Georgia, MPUM, District 5. Council member is Liliana Bakhtiari. Next slide. This is a mixed-use development property, and it is comprised of 86 HomeFlex units, 38 public housing units, totaling 124 units. From the HomeFlex component, there are 85 households with 85 household members, and their income limits are as such. We have 59 households at the 30% AMI below, and 26 households between the 31 and 50% AMI. The financial performance of this property, there's a net operating income of $342,200. The operating expenses per unit is $5,967. The last physical inspection score received was a pass rating score. The last business process review was an excellent rating score. The FY22 MTW benchmark performance, occupancy was at 99%. All rent was collected, so there was no delinquent rent at this particular property. The emergency work orders and routine work orders met the MTW benchmarks, and there is no work compliance component at this development. The projected HomeFlex subsidy over the next 20 years will result in approximately $18.1 million. Are there any questions?
Only one question for me. So I'm assuming that the HomeFlex units that we're talking about here are all one-bedrooms?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
They're 1 and 2s. You have a question?
No questions for me, except this is, I think, the cleanest property performance report we've seen in the last year. So kudos to the team and to the partner on the scores and performance.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Said, I guess we'll put it up for a vote. All those in favor can indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Commissioners, before you is a copy of Resolution Number 23-37, where the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia seeks authorization to provide a commitment to extend the HomeFlex agreement for Columbia Senior Residences at MLK in support of a 4% low-income housing tax credit application.
All right. May I have a motion to consider Resolution 2337? May I have a second?
Second.
So moved by Commissioner Alvarado and seconded by Commissioner Hooker. Shannon, you have the floor again.
Thank you so much. So for this property, the current HomeFlex agreement and board authorization for this property is set to expire on September 9, 2032. However, I come before you today seeking board approval to extend the HomeFlex agreement for an additional 13 years, resulting in a new total term of 20 years in support of the 4% tax credit application for this development. The owner of this development is Columbia Senior Residences at MLK LP. The property manager is Columbia Residential. This is also a senior community for those persons age 62 and older. It is located at 125 Logan Street in PUV. Council member is Jason Winston in District 1. The property unit mix, there's a total of 122 units at this property. It is comprised of 114 HomeFlex households right now that have 115 members. The AMI levels, there are 100 households whose income is at or below the 30% AMI and 14 households whose income is between the 31% and 50% AMI. The financial performance of this property, there's a net operating income of $135,612. The last physical inspection score rating was passed. The last business process review score was an excellent. The FY22 MTW benchmark performance, 99%. There was a 1% rent delinquency. The work orders and routine work orders are within the MTW benchmarks. There is no work compliance component. And projected subsidy over a 20-year contract period is resulting in $21.2 million. Because this is a restructure, the sources and the uses are projected to be at $19.6 million. This property is now 16 years old, and it has completed its initial tax credit compliance period and is in need of renovation with a new financial structure. The plans for renovation will include interior and exterior upgrades with an estimated cost of $59,000 per unit and has an anticipated close date projected to occur sometime later this year. Are there any questions?
So I do have one quick question. I saw it on the last one, but I didn't ask it. I'll ask it this time. So what's the difference between, so I see where it says 122 HomeFlex units, but then it has 114 that are AH households served.
That means that you have vacancies. Not all 124 units are occupied.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no other discussion, I will call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, before you is a copy of Resolution Number 23-27, where the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia seeks authorization to create a new nonprofit subsidiary corporation to facilitate the creation and preservation of housing on publicly owned land or as part of a project owned in part by a public agency and other related matters.
All right. May I have a motion to consider resolution number 2327?
So moved.
May I have a second? All right. So moved by Commissioner Faruqi and seconded by Commissioner Alvarado. Josh Humphreys, you have the floor.
Hey, everyone. Josh Humphreys, Senior Advisor to the Mayor for Housing. Thanks for having me here today to talk about the Atlanta Urban Development Corporation. So before I get started on this, I just want to thank a couple people that have worked on this for the last couple of months, pulling this together. Gene and Terry, Dwayne, Lisa, Dee Dee, and a whole bunch of other, I'm going to start messing up names because I'm going to forget somebody on here, John Majors and a few others. But really thinking over the last, I would say for the last year plus, since the mayor took office 18 months ago, developing public land has been one of the primary elements of our strategy to address affordable housing needs and build or preserve 20,000 affordable housing units by the end of 8 years. And, I think that a lot of the work that's been done, really to high level is really the mayor formed a housing strike force, brought all these agencies together. We started working, really collaborating, I think building momentum, working together. You just got like 4 straight deals of public land sites through the Housing Authority. And so as we were doing this, really one of the things that the mayor asked us to do is go find out who the best people in the world that are doing this, that are using their land really at a high level, that are thinking about the long view of things, not just the short view of things, and what are we not doing that we could be doing? And then that was the basic question we got tasked to do. So we started calling around. We participated in a cohort called Putting Assets to Work that had 5 other U.S. cities, met with folks really around the world and asked that basic question. And I think the big takeaway for us was that, we are doing actually a lot of really good work on public land. I think in the U.S., we're in the front end of that space. There's 2 pieces that we think that there's really an opportunity to expand on. And one of those really, and actually, if you'll go to the, can I move these slides? Go a couple slides, one more slide in. So I'll stop here. So high level goals really for us were like, okay, like we need something that is not dependent on tax credit deals. The vast majority of the deals that come before this board are low-income housing tax credit deals. And the reality of it is, in the state of Georgia, that is become a scarce resource, really just in the last few years. Post-2020, that system crashed, where it was an oversupply of applicants that are applying for it on privately owned land as well as publicly owned land. And there's scarce resources at the state. So we need to be creative about creating new affordable housing options that are not through that program. And so that was one thing, that, especially looking at international models and other cities and states that have dealt with that type of tax credit pinch for a long time. What have you done? How have you leveraged your public land to help address that goal? And so that was one of the long-term, one of the big goals for us on this. And the other to us is wanting to see, what can we do that could really complement and adds to the overall affordable housing space. There's a lot of public land that needs to be developed and a lot of agencies that are working on that. So can we create something that is building this type of non-tax credit focused housing and complements really the great work that Atlanta Housing, Invest Atlanta, and others are doing on that. And that led us really to the last part of this, that time and again we talked to cities that had said, we created a separate development corporation that was focused exclusively on a set portfolio of properties, and said, hey, and they were like, start small, get 6 properties, and say your job is to go develop those properties, go find development partners, move that forward, and focus only on that. And we think that there's real value in moving that type of approach forward alongside the work that this agency and others are doing. And so the Urban Development Corporation would focus on that, right? The goal is we'll take an initial set of properties, and you can go to the next slide. I'll talk through a little bit of the logistics here. So earlier, I think it was last month, it came before this board, 2023 housing bond, $100 million that City Council passed and really through the work of this board and Invest Atlanta made possible. A big chunk of that fund is set up to enable this, to create a funding source that can help with these types of non-tax credit deals on public land. The creation of this entity really is the next step, we think, in that process, because it'll allow for bringing a specialized team that can focus on on this type of development, but also insulate the existing agencies from that work, right? I mean, we're talking about a new model that's focused on non-tax credit deals and having some level of insulation is helpful. It also will help us recruit the specialized talent we think we need in order to move that work forward in a fast way. And so that work, immediately after the creation of this, our goal is to work with City Council on identifying city-owned sites because the city is not well positioned to develop its public land. So there's a lot of properties on city-owned sites and other partner agencies that have come to the strike force and said, hey, we want to be helpful, but we're also not developers. We don't know how to think about our land that way. How can we work with the city and with the mayor on that? So working to identify those initial sites and then the seed funding as well for it to help get the agency off the ground and get the UDCs, help stand it up and really get the wheels moving. And in order to do that, we think that building a kind of fee-based staffing model will be helpful. I'd say fee-based because having a performance-based model helps really lean into things that work on the private market side from an incentive angle, saying, hey, we want to have the team say, okay, based on the pace of affordable housing production and your ability to move that forward, then we can scale what your compensation may be on that. And that I think from recruiting the talent that's doing generally market rate stuff that's bringing affordable housing into it, because I think typically in the affordable housing space you have the low income housing tax credit world and you have the market rate world, and there's not much in between. And part of what we're trying to build here is something that's in between that. And so setting the model up in order to be able to do that, we think is really important. And so the last thing I'll mention is that this piece is really the minimum baseline goal for us in all of these projects is starting with a 30% affordable housing units and 70% at market rate. Now, we think that's fungible. That's a baseline. I mean, maybe you get up to 40, maybe you get to 50. But one of the things internationally that's worked really well about the social housing model, and that's what this is that we're building. It's a social housing model. I'd say it's the best of public housing in the U.S. and the best of private market housing, right? There's a lot of things that didn't work about public housing, which is why we've seen it go away over the last several decades. A large part about it is that the properties just didn't cash flow. So if there was not like millions of dollars in public funding, then the properties just didn't make sense. And so social housing models that are done in Europe, Asia, and otherwise, they have enough market rate units in them that generate enough revenue to cross-subsidize the units within the projects themselves, which allow for long-term affordability with less subsidy over the horizon of it. And so that's really the focus of what this would do. It says, how do we take that type of model, bring it here to Atlanta, and add new affordable housing units that otherwise are not going to be built through any of the existing streams that we have available. So that's the high level on this. The other thing I'll mention is, so the board itself, what we have put before you would be a 7-member voting board that includes 4 of you. Thank you for graciously agreeing to be on it, those of you that are, as well as 3 additional nominees from the mayor. And Alan Ferguson and Ashani Omar are here today. We're excited for the opportunity to have them participate in this board as well. If you've got any questions for them or their interest or experience for being on this board, they're happy to answer any questions you have. So that's high level on this. I'm happy to walk through any other details. I know you've seen this deck a couple of times, so I won't run through all of that, but I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Josh relative to this corporation? And if not, then maybe we want to acknowledge the people who have been asked to serve on the board.
Yep.
Since I see some faces in the audience. Do you want to do any questions first? Okay. Do you want to maybe introduce some of those folks?
I'll Alan introduce himself. You want to come up here and say hi real quick?
Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to actually be nominated, to serve in this capacity. So I'm Alan Ferguson. I currently serve as president and CEO of Atlanta Habitat for Humanity. But most of you are familiar, definitely, this Atlanta housing family is familiar with me through my previous work that I've done with Invest Atlanta, where I formerly served as Senior Vice President of Community Development. So the reason why I'm here and the reason why I'm interested in serving in this capacity is that I sincerely and fundamentally believe that Atlanta is 100% fully on board in the affordable housing crisis. We need to continue to press forward and find innovative and creative solutions to address that crisis. Relying upon the well-established and in-place systems is not going to move the needle and we need to bring really everything in our arsenal as a city, as a community forward, to address the needs of our residents in regards to housing affordability, as well as housing choice. And so that's the reason why I'm here. More than happy to answer any questions about my background and experience, but I'm looking forward to this journey and moving Atlanta forward.
All right, well, I certainly don't have any questions. I've worked with Alan. We did a lot of work when I initially was working on inclusionary zoning with our mayor. And so excited to see you serve in this capacity, provided that everyone says yes.
All right, thank you.
So, any questions for Alan? If not, Ashani, do you want to have Ashani come up?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashani Omard. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, Josh. I will just start by saying I'm excited to be a part of this opportunity. I currently serve as Senior Vice President for Strategic Housing Investments for the Atlanta Neighborhood Development Partnership. I previously worked for ANDP for about 7 years, focused on managing our CDFI loan fund, and then went on special assignment, I'd like to say, for 2 years to serve as founding executive director of the Atlanta Affordable Housing Fund. And a little known fact about AAHF is we launched January 2020. I had already said yes, and I couldn't say no, but we decided to sort of lean in and really focus on what we believe to be a proof of concept of the power of public-private nonprofit partnership. It was really an opportunity to demonstrate the unique role that the private sector can play in helping to not only raise funds and capitalize a fund, but also to lean in from a partnership perspective and help to scale and accelerate the supply of affordable housing. I'm happy to report that proof of concept was proven. We have now most recently launched, the fund, now run by Sarah Kirsch, has launched a $100 million impact fund along with a philanthropic fund, along with the partnership of the City of Atlanta. So I'm here to say I believe in the power of public-private nonprofit partnership. We've seen it here in my days as a developer back in Boston and Cincinnati. We used to do what I like to call funky stuff, like leveraging or partnering with universities to build student housing while also building affordable housing for residents that were for sale housing. So when we talk about that cross-subsidy, there are models that have not only been proven here nationally, but as Josh mentioned earlier, a lot of interesting work internationally. And I think what's exciting about this opportunity is that it allows us to focus on scale. And as much as I love ANDP and what we're doing, there are not enough ANDPs to get us to 20,000 units. We really have to start to think innovatively about how we focus on scale, how we bring more partners to this work. So excited to really embark on a journey to see how we can get there faster. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.
Let me stay for questions.
Yeah, sure. Any questions for Ashani? All right, well, I'll just say we're excited to have you and to join in this effort. So thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you guys coming in and speaking to us directly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, anybody else need to, I don't think I see any other faces.
No, that's it.
Okay, all right, good. That said, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll head to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Did you still need to say something?
We're voting on the resolution and not the board, correct?
I think it might be all one.
No, we are voting
Yeah.
on both. The resolution and the board, it's all in. Yes, it's on the,
All right, sounds good. I'll try that again. All right, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you so much, Josh. All right, Today, we don't have an executive session scheduled, so we will move into our report from our president and CEO.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
First, I'd like to say I need your prayers, I need your wishes, because if I win Mega Millions on Friday, I will provide gap financing for all the ones that we have shortage of funds, okay? That's a promise from me, okay? I'm doing it publicly, okay? So it's just Friday. On the serious side, I want to tell the Commissioners, I want to tell the public, that we received the $40 million implementation grant for Choice Neighborhoods for Bowen Homes. Our staff, the community, congressional leaders, we all came together and made this thing happen. This is the second Choice neighborhood that we received subsequent to the Hope 6 that we received in Atlanta Housing. I told the staff today that Atlanta House is not on the map because of the Choice neighborhood. Atlanta is on the map because of things that we do, and we do well across this country. We are the ones that everyone looks at and says, how do we do it over here? Why is Atlanta being so successful? It's because you have a great staff, and you have a great leader as the mayor, and also the community involvement in what we do every day. So I'm very, very proud of that fact. The development consists of 2,000 total units, 1,800 will be rental, 200 for sale units. There will be 825 affordable units for families earning up to 80% of AMI, which is 41% of affordability, 41%. Secondly, I want to tell you about Civic Center. I know I made a mistake when I said that we had to bring this back to the board. You have given me authorization to execute an MDA with the parties of the Civic Center. We executed that agreement last week, Friday. So I want to say congratulations. The only exclusion to that is that we have to bring the Performing Arts Center back to you as we decide what that's going to look like in the agreement. So I want to just make sure I make that modification. Ashley Scholars, the projected close was June 27, 23. Development will consist of 212 total rental units, which include 90 home flex, 24 tax credits, and 98 market. So we're getting to that 10,000 slowly but surely. On another note, a couple of things to the board. We need to, I'm going to suggest or recommend that the next meeting that we have in September that we go on site. And I'm also asking that we have some time before the board meeting to do a site visit, to go around to all these different sites that we are talking about here today, that you can see it and you can give a presentation. So I'm asking in September that we can allocate some time before the meeting so that we can run around and show you the fruits of your labor and the approvals that you have. So I just want you to put that in your notebook, because I think it'll be a great, fantastic tour of what we're going to have. And going back to Bowen Homes, August 3rd, we're going to have a celebration at Roosevelt Hall sometime after 1 o'clock. We're going to bring HUD officials from Washington, D.C. We have the regional office going to be here, and we're going to have a celebration. We're going to receive the $40 million check. I hope it's not in my name. I hope it's in Atlanta Housing's name, because I don't want to be in the newspaper for anything else. Commissioner Alvarado, you brought up a good question, and I want to bring this out about Section 3. Section 3 is dear to my heart, especially when it comes to people who are less fortunate, especially our residents, to provide an opportunity for contracting, especially not being a JV, but being a general contractor, and not just construction, but all the other different trades that we have and other opportunities. If it's 55%, we should attain 55%. We should never keep settling for the minimum. If we can do 55 and we can pound them, that's what's going to be beneficial to us. Not because we're putting pressure on, that's what they should be doing. And I think right now our Section 3 program is by far better than any program across this country. Now, I used to be in Chicago, and I said the same thing in Chicago, but it's not there anymore. But you guys have a great staff who are promoting jobs well-paying jobs to get people off subsidy into home ownership. And that's the goal. That's always the goal for us. You mentioned about the supermarket. My only concern with the supermarket is my preference is always build a supermarket versus have them buy the land and build their own supermarket. Because you guys know the economy, you know that when a supermarket is not making it, they just go immediately. And I don't want that to happen on Herndon because everyone's looking forward to it. We have great community support for this, but I would have preferred. And when we talk with this supermarket, is that the jobs, not just the worker bees, but the management jobs come to the residents who are in that surrounding area. Because I know for a fact if something happens and they have to jettison out of here, hopefully we can acquire that supermarket and continue being a co-op that will work because we have trained residents in that neighborhood. So that's what I'm looking forward to on Herndon Homes and making that happen. In anything that we do, we should have a big commercial retail opportunity for the surrounding community and not just people who live on public and assisted housing. So I wanted to say that. Any questions of me?
Jean, I just want to congratulate you and all of the Atlanta Housing staff for the great news that is public today, that Atlanta has won the Choice Neighborhood Grant for Bowen Homes. Trish, I know, worked very hard on that. There were many people in the mayor's office, spearheaded by Courtney English, who worked very hard on this too, and there are so many partners here and those who are not here that did. And I just want to state that given everything we've talked about today, the Choice Neighborhood Grant, all the deals we have approved, this new entity that the mayor's office has initiated that we approved today, it's just a testament to the mayor's vision and passion for driving affordable housing and change in our city, and it is a exciting and impactful time to be involved in this work. And
Thank you, Commissioner.
I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to make a note, and we have a great mayor for the city of Atlanta, Mayor Andre Dickens, but I also want to make a mention how we got here in Bowen Homes. When I first came to Atlanta and accepted this job, I went and met with Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor. And she had said to me, she said, Gene, we need to do something on the east side. We need to do something on the east side. Now, I just got here. I don't know where Bowen Homes was at. And she said, we need to do something with Bowen Homes. I said, okay, we'll do something with Bowen Homes. So I came back to the staff. I said, where's Bowen Homes? I said, we need to think about Bowen Homes for a choice neighborhood. They said, well, let's take a look at some other developments. So they came back to me and said Bowen Homes was the top one that we should consider. As you know, we talked about we had a hiccup in this, and we didn't give up. The staff didn't give up. We worked hard. We worked hard with the community. We had the support with Mayor. It was just a great opportunity that we worked hard and we received what we were supposed to receive in this great opportunity to provide something in Bowen Homes on the east side. So my testament to the commissioners, thank you very much for believing in us and hanging in there, asking the right questions, the appropriate questions that we should be dealing with. And that I just want to say thank you to our staff. The staff did their job like they always do. We don't ever have the opportunity to be in the AGC when it comes to Atlanta housing. I still don't understand that. What we contribute to this city about all the affordable housing, all the contracting, all the retail, the things that we do. Hopefully one day, because of all these developments that we got in the queue, that someone will come to us and say, let's tell our story. But it seems like no one wants to tell our story. Now, I don't want to degrade my colleague Beltline, but they're always talking about the Beltline, but they don't talk about Atlanta housing. So I just want to say that publicly, that they need to start looking at Atlanta housing. Thank you.
All right, anyone else have any comments?
I'm sorry, there's a presentation by Ernestine on the Choice Neighborhood and Ashley Scholars. I forgot to mention that. Ernestine?
Thank you, Jim.
Doesn't she look lovely?
She does.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ernestine Gary with Choice Neighborhoods. So just wanted to take a few minutes to share with you the book that you have at your stations and let you know how hard we worked on preserving and memorializing the history of the three choice neighborhoods. So now we have two choice neighborhoods, so I need to say university choice neighborhoods. But the history of University Homes, we contracted in 2020 with New South Associates to create this history document. We think it's extremely important for us to remember where we came from with these three neighborhoods. So we're talking about the Atlanta University Center, Asheville Heights, and Vine City. So I'm hoping that you will take some real time and read the history of these three neighborhoods from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and see how Atlanta has transformed into the beautiful city that it is today. On the front, you have Beaver Slide, which was the former community before University Homes was built. And then we had University Homes, the first public housing development in the nation for African Americans in 1937. And then the rich history of the other three neighborhoods and the Atlanta University Center institutions. So I've given Commissioner Elliott 2 copies of this book because she and her brother both grew up in John Hope Homes, which is right adjacent to University Homes, and so they are family to us. We had a great grand opening for Roosevelt Hall, which was the former community hub for University Homes. If you haven't had a chance to come by and tour Roosevelt, I encourage you to do it. Atlanta Housing committed $12 million to renovate this building and really preserve it for our residents. So we have, at the end of the day, for Choice Neighborhoods, we'll have about 560 new units of housing in and around Roosevelt Hall. 63% of those units will be affordable, which is awesome. All the phases of multifamily have been completed with the exception of one, and Jean talked about that today, which is Ashley Scholars Landing 2, the 212 units. After that, we will have townhomes and condominiums on the site. So it's truly going to be a transformed community. So just wanted to share this with you. If you need additional copies, please let me know, and enjoy the read.
Thank you so much. All right. If I have a comment, but I want to make sure if everyone else, any other commissioners have any comments before we close today? All right, so I will just say a couple things. First, so thank you, Jean, for your leadership and for the comments. I think it's important. I know that we've talked a lot about making sure that the story of what's happening with Atlanta Housing is told and told well. So thank you to the media members that are here today, because I want to make sure they don't feel that we don't appreciate them. We want the big boys to be telling the story, but we appreciate those who are telling the story in their absence. And big girls, excuse me. Yes, thank you. So that's I think one note. Today is special to me just because I live in between Herndon and Bowen. I live right in smack between the two of them, and so the things that happen in those two places affect how I live every day. And so I'm excited about where we're going and how we're developing that part of Atlanta. But I'm also not naive. I don't want us to yada, yada, yada over the fact that Civic Center got done. It's not an easy deal to get done, and so I want to thank everyone who was involved, all the questions that came from my colleagues in making sure that it was the right deal at the right time. And so we are going to be looking forward to seeing that part of our city be redeveloped and catalyzed and make equitably awesome the way that we know that it can and should be. So certainly that's a story that should be told and what we should talk about for today. And then lastly, I just want to make a comment about what you put together, Ernestine, this book. I think one of the first things I said when I was named board chair was that the thing that I am very passionate about, and I want to renew this point publicly since we got a full audience, that we need to make sure that as we are changing these neighborhoods, that we do not forget the history that was there when we got there, right? We're gonna be turning a lot of dirt, but that I think in Roosevelt Hall, where we have that history wall, this book, they need to happen everywhere we do development. because there were neighborhoods and rich history there, and I don't want us to, I mean, everywhere I go into the neighborhoods, I see these new names for places that had names before they were there, right? Upper West Side is a perfect example. And I lived in the west side of Atlanta and in Buckhead, and some of those neighborhoods, Landtown, they got new names. Well, they don't need new names. We just need to tell the story of the names of what was there beforehand, and I want to make sure that we don't lose that in what we build. And so how we do that, whether that's digitally or whether that's in, on a wall or in a book, however we do that, we need to make sure that we institute that in what we do for all of our developments. So with that said, thank you. I think this is a great day for Atlanta Housing, and I'm excited about what we're doing going forward. Oh, I got correct. So let's also lift up in prayer. We have a missing commissioner today. She is not doing well. We will not talk about how much the details around that, but we do want to keep her lifted in hopes that things will turn for her. And so our hearts and minds are with Commissioner Harris. And so with that, I will try to close out today's meeting by asking for a motion. Okay. Oh, yes, okay, you're right. See, this is what happens when you don't get on the script. Just want to remind everyone and the public that there will be no committee meetings or regular board meeting in August. Our next committee meetings and board meeting will be in September 2023. And so with that, if there's no further business of the board, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
All right, I think I heard a move. One of y'all can be the second. All right, cool, thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned. The time is 3:50.